call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. In consideration of the COVID-19 social distancing recommendations, this meeting is being held virtually via Zoom. The public is invited to participate and will be allowed to make comments through the online chat feature. Please note that comments are visible to the whole group. If you wish to make a public comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record and be conscientious of others trying to speak. The meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. And so first up tonight is public comments. This is the time for members of the public to make comments on any items that are not on our agenda tonight. And I'm not seeing any raised hands or comments in the chat box, so we'll move on to public presentations, which are informational only. Our first public presentation is the final plat of the Mainstreet Credit Union from our city planner, Ms. Service.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Okay, so the subject property is 6025 Lamar Avenue. It's currently developed with the Mission branch of the Mainstreet Credit Union. And over here facing Martway Street, we have 6219 Martway Street, which is developed with the former Mission Barn Players Theater and also the drive-through elements that are associated with the Mainstreet Credit Union. So the applicant requested approval of plat to adjust the property lines so the drive-through is on the same property as the Mainstreet building rather than on the lot with the Barn Players building. The surveyor confirms that the sidewalk, bus stop, the Rock Creek Trail that border the property all lie within the public right-of-way, so right-of-way was not requested with the plat. The Planning Commission considered the plat at their meeting on December 28th, 2020. During the public hearing, a neighbor asked whether any projects were proposed for the property. The applicant hasn't shared any information with the Community Development Department about project proposals or anything that's in the conceptual development phase, so I'm not aware of any at this time. The Planning Commission voted 8-0 to approve the preliminary and final plat of the Mainstreet Credit Union with the two conditions listed in staff report. So at the January 20th City Council meeting, the City Council has the opportunity to consider the final plat of the Mainstreet Credit Union. So if you can see my mouse here, instead of having this line that separates the building from the drive-through, it's just going to go right through this median here. And this is what the final plat looks like. I'm happy to answer any questions, or otherwise that concludes the presentation.
All right, thanks, Kaitlyn. Anyone have any questions for Kaitlyn? All right. Not seeing or hearing any, we'll move into our action items. Our first action item tonight is acceptance of the Community Development Committee minutes for our December 2nd meeting from Audrey McClanahan.
Thank you. Yes, so presented here are the Community Development Committee minutes from last month, December 2nd, 2020.
All right, is everybody good? Those?
Recommend acceptance, yes.
Okay, great. Next up, we have the mural criteria and application process from Mr. Scott and Ms. Service.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to try to pull up my report. I'm looking for it right now in the packet to get past all the site plans and everything. Have a minute. Audrey, do you want to share the screen with me? Or
You should be.
charge that. And,
I think you have the power.
okay. All right. So we were approached back in the fall by the owner of Hands Custom Tattoo Shop Mr. Sean Gilbert. The shop is located at 6909 Johnson Drive. And he was interested in placing a rather large wall mural on the east side of his building, that side that is along Broadmoor. So he kind of asked us if we had any guidelines or stipulations or any kind of approval process. We don't really. And so there's really no reference to wall murals of any kind other than in the city sign code, chapter 430 of the Michigan Municipal Codes. And that states any murals are defined as any mosaic painting or graphic art or combination thereof, which is professionally applied to a building and which does not convey a commercial message. Then there's kind of a further description that provision within that code that they're excluded from the sign code itself. And they're considered to be integral, decorative, or architectural feature of the building or works of art, so long as such features or works do not contain letters, trademarks, moving parts, or lights. So there is no application process right now to speak of for a wall mural of any kind. With that said, we know that wall murals have become very popular in the last several years. They're not only a way of just kind of fixing up a dead space on the side of the building or parking lot area, but really become a way of kind of activating an area, creating a placemaking, if you will, for downtown or built environment. There's examples all over Kansas City and throughout cities in the United States of wall murals on the side of buildings. So with that, we decided to do some research on examples of wall murals from other cities. This is a wall mural that was proposed by Mr. Gilbert on the side of his building on Johnson Drive in Broadmoor. And these are some other examples of wall murals that we have found in the Kansas City area just by kind of doing a Google Maps search. These two top examples, I think, are 39th Street in Kansas City, right around that area. This bottom example is actually downtown Overland Park. And then this example, this top example, with the dragon kind of busting out of the side of the building there. I believe it's in the crossroads. There's one in the middle that kind of depicts the state of Kansas, and a little dot representing the city of Shawnee. It's obviously in the city of Shawnee, their downtown area. And the bottom two examples are just examples that we found looking around the internet. I think the one of the elephant might actually be in South Africa. In South Africa. And this was an example, the one with the balloons is an example that we actually used in a visual preference survey on the comp plan website, which actually received quite a few favorable votes. So there were a lot of those that visited the comp plan website and actually went through that visual preference survey. There was a lot of favorable comments in regards to wall murals like this. We looked at several examples from other cities around the country. These included Overland Park, Orlando, Florida, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Ventura, California, San Diego, California. Cities kind of big and mid-sized and a little bit smaller. And then we kind of went through the design guidelines and materials that we were able to get from their websites and pick out, frankly, the best of what we could find to create our own design guidelines. All of them have kind of an application process. All of them have varying degrees of guidelines that mostly speak to the application of a wall mural itself in terms of where it's located on the building, how big it's going to be on the building, permission of the building owner that's different from the applicant, the type of materials that are going to be used, a maintenance plan for the mural once it is in place. We don't really speak at all to the context of the mural, which is something that everyone always gets a little skittish about in terms of the actual context. You know, what one may find to be art, somebody else may not find to be art. So I always kind of want to keep an open mind as to what's being proposed for the wall mural itself. All these cities that we looked at had varying degrees of review. Most of them had an arts commission or some type of historical or architectural review board that was assigned to review the murals. I think probably the two exceptions that come to mind are the city of Orlando, Florida. I think they have the arts coordinator on staff that was kind of assigned to review the applications. And then the city of Overland Park was kind of an interesting situation. They've recently adopted a new comprehensive plan update. And there's a public arts element to that comprehensive plan update. And they've gone so far as to actually adopt an arts master plan, public arts master plan. And they've gotten some funding to implement segments of that public arts master plan. And we have an arts coordinator on staff. But all of that speaks to public art that's funded by public dollars. So it might be a statue on a city-owned parcel of property or a park. It may be wayfinding way signs or entry points into various areas of the city. It might be even things as simple as benches in their downtown area, whatever the case may be. They had several business owners in the downtown area that were interested in joining together and hiring an artist to paint murals on their buildings. And since these were privately funded ventures on private property, the Arts Master Plan didn't really speak to that per se. So they wound up instead making an application to the City Planning Commission for essentially a deviation from the form-based code that governs design criteria in the downtown area. And again, the application spoke mostly to the actual application of the mural, the type of paint that was going to be used and how it's going to be preserved and maintained. And that kind of thing. So that was really kind of the basis for drafting these wall mural guidelines that we have before us tonight. I did share these with the Planning Commission at one of their meetings recently. And I've also shared them with Keith Heaven, our land use attorney, for a legal review. So what you see, I didn't want to steer away from the original document that I shared with you back in the fall. It's kind of a draft. So I simply went in and made updates to it so you can kind of see what's been changed. I did ask in particular about kind of this question about what's appropriate for community standards. And I think the original language I had was, murals shall not incorporate anything that is obscene in nature or objectionable to the sensitive or reasonable person. Pete proposed instead, Pete having the language, murals shall not incorporate anything that would be considered inappropriate and or indecent to contemporary community standards. He says that is language that has been some case law recently around that very topic. So he feels confident using that type of language. We also added the language, mural shall not contain material as protected under copyright laws unless permission is granted in the residence exception provided by the city. Some of this is more kind of semantics and language. Planning Commission, and I think probably a lot of you as well, were particularly interested in the ongoing maintenance of the mural once it's installed. We took kind of a wide approach when we first drafted this, asking if the applicant just kind of provide information about, again, what type of materials are going to be used, what they're going to do to prevent fading or exposure to the elements over time, any kind of protective coating that would sort of mitigate the effects of vandalism so they could be easily wiped away, spray painted, vandalized over the top of the mural. The Planning Commission was interested in seeing a more defined maintenance plan as part of the application. And they even suggested going so far as to having a timeline on the mural itself. So the application may be good for 3 years, 5 years, and require the applicant to come back to the city with a refresh of the application. And really, at that point, kind of an examination of the current state of the mural. And does it need itself to be refreshed or repainted or touched up in any way to preserve the ongoing mural? I didn't incorporate that in here, but that is obviously something we can discuss tonight. So I think, I'll just kind of stop there and open up for discussion and questions if you all have any. I do have a resolution as part of this packet. I think kind of given the discussion tonight, I recommend that what is stated, I come back next month with updated, refreshed set of guidelines based on our discussion tonight that you all can consider further. And at that time you feel it's acceptable, you can propose a resolution placed on the council agenda for approval.
Okay, so and Brian, in your view, we wouldn't vote on this at our January meeting. It would come back again in February with any finalization.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no pressing. We did give this set of guidelines to Mr. Gilbert along with the application. Provide that back to us, but we don't have any other applications pending right now.
Okay. Let's see. I can't see everyone because the screen share, but does anyone have a question for Brian? I've got a couple, but I'll open it up to everyone.
We'll stop sharing.
Yeah, Hillary?
Sure, thanks. Brian, I was wondering if we have any current murals or anything that qualifies as a mural in town right now.
The only thing that I can think of that qualifies as a mural would be the Mission Pet Mart. And that mural is on the south side of the building, which is in a sorry state of needing some repairs.
I wasn't sure if because of the commercial, that commercial language, it having, their name. I think the name of the company is on the side there as well.
Yeah, and the name of the company and the address, I think a phone number underneath it, all of that is in a section of the wall that's off to one side in the corner. And if you look at the entire wall in context, that sign, if you will, if you want to call it that, probably takes up less than 5% of the overall wall. But then the rest of it is the caricatures and the trees and things like that that fill the rest of the wall. I know there were some questions about who is. Yeah, I think kind of the question would be, do you consider that a sign or do you consider that a wall mural? When the applicant first made application for a sign permit about 2 years ago, she proposed it be a wall mural, which for us and staff instantly sent up red flags. And that was one concern. The other concern was, frankly, the fact that she wanted to paint on a brick wall. And although there's nothing anywhere in zoning regulations that prohibits painting on a brick wall, there's nothing in the sign ordinance that prohibits painting the sign. We kind of lean a little bit on the Johnson Drive design guidelines. And the Johnson Drive design guidelines speak to buildings having a certain color palette. It could be kind of earth tone colors, terracotta, beige, light brown. We've always kind of frowned upon the idea of somebody painting on a brick wall, especially that traditional brick wall that you see in a lot of the older buildings in the core of the downtown, that section from basically Lamar to Null. There's what I would consider almost historic buildings. Once you paint a building, it's hard to get it back off. You don't want to go in a different direction. So we really kind of scratched our heads on the application for a long time. I think we kind of stepped back and realized, well, maybe it's more of a sign. And if she can kind of shrink it down to keep it within 10% of that wall allowed under the sign ordinance, you would allow her to do that. There's a little bit of kind of cutting her tone of water too, if you will, to see if that's something that would be appropriate, it looks right, and maybe it's something that other business owners or property owners will want to do in the future. It seems acceptable. That is becoming kind of a growing trend. It's this idea of painting a sign on the side of your building as opposed to, we think it was a more traditional sign of a box structure or something that is mounted to the side of the building, in front of the building.
So with, say, Lulu's, for example, that would qualify as a sign?
Yeah.
Okay. And so they like Lulu's would have applied through our sign. Okay. So my thought, and this relates to the planning commission, is, having a little bit stronger language around the maintenance so that any existing murals that we have a little bit of a better way to try and get those refreshed now while we're taking action on it. But that's my thoughts. But beyond that, thank you guys for working so quickly to work with Sean and making this happen. I was really excited to see that you guys were able to turn this around. I'm sure it wasn't an easy process. So thank you.
Brian, I had one clarification, then Debbie, I'll go right to you. But while you were talking about the Johnson Drive design guidelines, I don't think I saw anything in here about what would take precedence. So if someone, within the Johnson Drive design guidelines came and wanted to paint a mural that otherwise meets all of these guidelines, how do you envision that working?
That's a very good question. I think that's really more of I hate to say it, I'll sort of throw it back to you all. It's kind of a policy question. The headless hands tattoo technically falls within the Johnson Drive design guidelines. The Johnson Drive design guidelines really applies to almost all the commercial corridors in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially all of Johnson Drive from Row all the way to Metcalf, and pretty much Martway, all those properties, kind of our commercial area on the west side of town. You know, probably those properties are kind of on the north side of town. The little shopping center there at the corner of 51st Street, Lamar, would not fall within the Johnson Drive design guidelines. But pretty much all those other properties I just mentioned do. And, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know of an answer, right? I think probably if the mural's acceptable, you know, the guidelines might overrule. The guidelines might overrule the guidelines.
So the mural, if it was otherwise acceptable, might overrule the other guidelines. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me, but since it didn't say and you brought up that point, I was just curious. But
This is the kind of stuff that we struggle with staff, and we're presented with these applications, and we're scratching our heads and hemming and hawing. And the zoning regulations and the Johnson Drive guidelines, and the form-based code, and a lot of these that they weren't really envisioning these types of things when they were created.
mm-hmm.
So we're having to kind of improvise a little bit.
Yeah. Debbie, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Or comment?
In the information that you portrayed, Brian, on the screen, some of it was a little small to read. Could you tell me if there's a ratio between verbiage, words, and art? I mean, does the art have to be the primary premise of the mural versus lettering that's way too large? How does that work?
Yeah, so again, you know, one of the provisions of a mural in our sign code, typical decorative or architectural feature of buildings or works of art, so long as such features of work do not contain letters, trademarks, moving parts, or lights. So there can't be any words in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Polly, I have a
Yeah, Ken, go ahead.
Brian, on the application, do you envision this being approved by staff? Is that how it's going to be reviewed?
That's what I was envisioning. But I think there might be some value to having these applications reviewed by the planning commission. That would probably be the best body. We don't have a commission or an architectural review board here at the city. We're trying to think of some type of review body that could take a look at these, and be the best option.
Brian, too, to that point, I wonder if it could be approved by staff with either like an appeal process to the planning commission and or council, just as an alternative thought on that.
Yeah, there was one city that we looked at that did a process like that.
I think that could be good, especially if you get into murals where there could be a debate on the, indecency point. And having that be done by, non-staff appointed body as the final say. I'd like to see some sort of appeal that could wind up with us potentially. Yeah. Trent, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question on and I don't know if there's like a legal reason for maybe the verbiage as it is, but is there any value in adding specific examples on what constitutes inappropriate and indecent by contemporary community standards? I mean, I understand kind of the spirit of that, and probably a lot of people would, but it does seem vague, and intentionally or not, could there be something that might be more better defined with what that actually constitutes?
I can ask Mr. Evan. I think his response is going to be leave it vague. If you start getting into defining examples, what I find offensive may not necessarily be what you find offensive. That's kind of where you start to split hairs a little bit. So it's almost better, I hate to say that, but it's almost better to kind of review those things as they come up. Maybe if there is a discussion about it, the appeals process would be the place to do that.
Brian, I had a couple questions too. One question about the text restriction. I'd like to maybe see further consideration of that. I understand that we're wanting to differentiate between what is a sign and what is a mural, but if you go to, the districts that have a lot of murals like Bushwick in New York City, or I can't remember the name of the district in Miami, you see a lot of, graffiti style lettering that is incorporated into the murals, either as text alone in that style or, with other imagery. And so it seems like we'd be ruling out sort of a big scope of public art potentially by having just a flat ban on text. I do get that gets tricky with the sign ordinance though, but that was just one potential for further thought. Similarly, and I think I had raised this with you before, and I saw you brought it up with the Planning Commission, but I don't think they really bit on having a discussion on this piece, was the percent of wall area. So I don't fully understand that restriction, and would personally like to see it removed. I think if it's a 2-story building and someone wants to spend the money and put in the effort on a 2-story really awesome mural, like why restrict it to 1? I didn't quite follow that. So I didn't know if there was any further thought on that, or if that's something that we might consider removing.
To be honest with you, I looked at that right out of another city's guidelines. And because at first blush, to me, it kind of makes sense. If you have a large 2- or 3-story building, you may not want to have an entire wall, 3-story wall that just has a mural on it that kind of overpowers visually the environment around it. I think the thought with that particular city's guidelines was to kind of scale it down a little bit, maybe more to a human scale, if you will. But since then, I have seen other examples of large buildings that do have an entire sidewall that's dedicated to a mural.
Yeah, I've seen some really cool ones, so I just thought maybe thinking on that piece a little more. I don't know what others' thoughts would be on that, but
Something that the council would like us to remove, we can certainly do that.
Can I make another comment, please?
yeah, Ken.
Perhaps it might be best, since we're kind of edging into this policy, that maybe we leave it the way it is and have some sort of mechanism for variance, granting a variance if it's approved that way, rather than to get into a lot of meticulous discussion at this point.
I mean, I'd personally like to see the discussion and then have potential revisions come back next month. I don't know what other people think.
No, I don't have any problem with the discussion. I'm just suggesting that to try to nail down the specifics of this policy at this time, when we haven't even really had any experience with it, it might be better for us to let the experience move forward and then have variance requests come forward to staff that can be reviewed at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could always also look at amending it, down the line if we find something isn't working with what we put into place. I did have two final questions. So one was on the maintenance plan you mentioned, Brian. And I noted that the language in the current draft is that submission of the plan is encouraged. And I wondered if instead we might want to make it mandatory so that we can tie the city's right to remove or paint over the mural to a failure to follow a maintenance plan. And I thought, sort of given the cost and investment and that these are works of art, et cetera, that, the issue of removal could get kind of touchy. And so I was wondering if we might want to consider putting on that application with the maintenance plan a consent, I consent that the city can remove at my cost, a deteriorated mural, just to make it really clear up front to people who are going through this process that, if they don't keep it up, they are agreeing, that it can be removed, explicitly agreeing to that, so that there's not, a fight about it later on. And then the last question I had, and maybe this is too big of a can of worms, but was about the residential, because I know that did come up at the Planning Commission. And so I wondered if it might make sense to have this be commercial wall mural guidelines and leave the residential silent for now, and consider that, at a future time as its own thing, because they do seem like completely separate issues to me. And I also wondered if residentially zoned, if that would include, is that just intended to be single family, or does that include multifamily and mixed use? And so maybe that restriction, should be left potentially silent and, visited as a separate manner. I don't know if anyone thinks on that.
Right. Multifamily property, although we don't do residential. Well, some multifamily properties, like the one that was just approved by you all last month, is commercial.
Mm-hmm.
City or zone residential, but a higher grade of residential. I was really thinking more of the single family homeowner, and if that property backs up to a commercial building that wants to paint a mural, or better yet, if the next door neighbor wants to paint a giant mural inside of their garage door or their house, the impact of that might have a property value.
Yeah, and that was why, to me, it seemed like sort of a whole nother can of worms that maybe we should take up separately, rather than, squeezing it into this ordinance. But like I said, others might have different views, but it just seemed like, sort of a different topic, related, but different.
I agree with you.
Jody, you would like to see it taken out in reference to residential?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts about that? Okay, I'll remove it and bring it back next month.
Any other comments or questions for Brian? Yeah, Hillary?
Just in follow-up to my earlier comment about stronger maintenance language, which I think connected to Sully's point, what will happen to an existing mural? Will they be required to complete a form and or a maintenance plan for the future? And then second question, related to Sully's earlier point about size, I agree with Sully. I don't think a size restriction is necessary. And I'm wondering, in relation to headless hands, isn't theirs the entire wall? Isn't that the mural 100%, not the 25% as outlined in our ordinance? So it seems like, I know they've already started work on it, but it just seems like, what we're building it off of, already kind of counters what this says.
In these proposed guidelines, what I was that if it's a one-story building, it can take up the entire wall. Two-story building, that's where the mural starts to get smaller. So the building, the smaller the mural. So they would have been okay under the proposed guidelines, 100% of the wall. And then in terms to the existing mural that I spoke of earlier, that's in pretty sad shape. That's kind of my intent, is that once we approve these, call that business owner, building owner, and talk about what can we do to freshen up that mural or do something new, and here's the guidelines.
Thank you, Brian.
Dottie, I think that Laura has a.
Yes, and I responded in the chat. So Laura's having technical difficulties tonight, but she asked, don't we want to leave in the prohibition on residential? I said, personally, I wanted to see it taken out, leave it, silent or as it is in the code, which I think implicitly would mean it's not really allowed, but then have that brought back as a separate resolution or discussion item, because residential seems, just a whole different can of worms to me than considering these sort of commercial district murals, but others might feel differently or want it to remain and, be amended instead. But that was sort of my take on it.
it's a property rights issue, and a lot of homeowners have statuary and artwork and things like that in the yard. In fact, we got an inquiry from somebody this week that wants to paint a jayhawk on the side of their fence in Millhaven.
Mhm.
Now, I find that obscene, but that's me. I rather see
Right. And I do wonder, if you can have a yard sculpture, why can't you have a painting on your wall? So it seems like maybe a separate discussion that has different issues involved. So that was kind of my thought in saying, take it out here and, bring it back as a separate discussion item.
You might have, if you have HOAs, they may have their own
Yeah.
governance over what can be in their yards. So
Mhm.
we have very few HOAs in our community, especially in the older neighborhoods.
What about if you have a statement that just says this does not apply to residential?
Yeah, it would just be commercial properties only.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that was my intent.
I wouldn't want to say this does not apply, because that's saying that then we open it up for people who want to paint the side of their house. I just leave it alone.
Yeah. So leave it silent, take out that piece and leave it
Yeah.
silent.
We won't know about it until the neighbor calls and complains. Somebody just painted a giant mural on the side of the garage.
Well, then, Brian, maybe then, rather than having it come out, maybe we could just get some more thought from staff when this comes back on if really it should be a complete residential ban, or should there be, some separate case-by-case analysis, sort of a separate provision, that these aren't the rules that apply to residential. Those are either banned or, evaluated case by case or something.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I guess my question, unless I'm missing it, and I very, very well might be, but my thought is, if you really want to, if you don't specifically prohibit them now, you have that potential for someone to paint the mural and then you're discussing it. So what you want, I think, is to prohibit them in residential areas, right? And then make someone, if they want to paint it, come to you specifically for guidelines.
Well, I thought the take of the whole reason why I had this hands came up in the first place was that because the rules were silent, that meant it wasn't allowed, and that you would have to have a rule authorizing it for it to be allowed. So I was just suggesting that it come out of this piece, which would maintain the status quo that if the code is silent, they aren't allowed in residential areas. And then we could have a separate discussion and plan developed for residential, but maybe that's not how it would work in residential.
Well, I think the issue, even going back to Headless Hands, is the code was silent, which created a whole lot of back and forth discussion. And had the code been specific in that instance, we would have moved much more quickly. I mean, we moved quickly into establishing the criteria, but I think we would have, I think you are setting yourselves up. We know we've had a question about murals in residential areas. So my concern would be if you adopt these without that prohibition, it's exactly what was just said, and it's going to pop up on the side of someone's garage, and then we'll be kind of asking them to take it down.
Then I guess maybe if that's the case, rather than having it be silent, I would personally prefer not to see a flat prohibition, and instead say, it will be, we could even say, so much as they're discouraged, but they'll be evaluated on a case-by-case basis or something like that. Someone who's off on a lot that doesn't have any visible neighbors and wants to paint something on their garage, does that matter? Or what if you come to the planning commission and you have consent of, the 8 houses around you? Should you be prohibited? So I think that a flat ban is maybe not the right solution in my mind, is what I was trying to get at.
This is Kristen. I agree with Laura. I think that we should put the language in to prohibit them from residential areas. Thank you.
Holly, can we just go back and have staff create some language and then look at if it meets our needs?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Are people good with having staff take a further look at that piece? All right, seeing some nods. We'll give Brian some more work. All right, any last questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to our fourth action item, which is the acceptance of the stormwater condition inventory final report from Ms. Duran.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Tonight is somewhat appropriate to talk about stormwater at two different agenda items as it's raining. So I wasn't planned, and at least it's not snowing. BHC Roads was retained by the city to perform a condition inventory of the city's stormwater pipes and structures. And this draft information was presented at the August 2020 CDC meeting. The final report has now been completed and staff is recommending acceptance of this report, which is included in your agenda packet. Just a brief refresher, stormwater infrastructure pipe and inlets were inventoried and grouped into 4 zones within the city. Zone 1 starting at the north end and moving south to Zone 4, which is south of Johnson Drive to city limits. The pipes and structures were given a condition rating of 1 through 5, with 1 being the best or recently installed and 5 being nearer at the point of failure in accordance with Johnson County SMAC guidelines. So BHC has performed a condition rating, and then that is sent to Johnson County, and they have an algorithm that they run, which combines the likelihood of failure and consequence of failure to determine the estimated risk. And if it's greater than 3.2, then it's eligible for county funding, and the city would apply for funds. I think it's in May for the following year. And then depending on how much funds are available, you know, we would receive some of that funding. So the city has, that we know about, based on our inventory, a total of 211,001 linear feet of pipe and 1,181 structures, inlets, manholes, etc. BHC inspected approximately 96,000 linear feet of pipe and 598 structures that were previously unrated or had ratings of 3.2 or greater. And that was based on an inventory that was performed in 2009. So the remainder of that pipe was not inspected this time around, as it was not funded by Johnson County, partially funded by Johnson County. I'd like to go ahead and pull up the table that you saw last time. If I can share this. Let's see. So you've seen this table before. But they went ahead and went back and took a look at the numbers to make sure they're right. And so the costs are divided up into ratings and zones. So the top table is for pipes, and the right is for structures, and then the bottom is combined. So the blue column, the additional pipes that were not inspected in past 12 months, are based on the ratings that Johnson County Ames had in their system. So those are estimated risks under 3.2. And if you look at that middle line, they're estimating a total of almost $47 million for a total cost of replacement of the system over time. And so that's a hefty number, and we'll talk more about money and budgets later, but now we know our total cost of replacement should we decide to replace it over time over a service life of 50 years. The bottom table shows that about 4.9 million is the estimated cost for replacing 4s and 5s. So that's kind of good news. I mean, Mission has probably most of their infrastructure, except for what's been replaced with projects, was originally installed 50 years ago or more. And so, you know, about 12% of our system are 4s and 5s. So even though we have corrugated metal pipe, we're not in as bad a condition as we think. Now, if we combine the 3s, that's about $20 million. So it gets a little more expensive. if anybody has any questions about the table, feel free to ask, or I can kind of move on to the maintenance plan.
Celia, can you tell me, the zones are defined by area? Is that what the zones are?
Yes, and I have a map if you want to see, but zone 1 is north of 51st, and then zone 2 is the next one, and then zone 3 is down, and then zone 4. If you want me to pull up a map, I can.
Well, I think I've got it. I think
Yeah, you do have it.
I do, but I'm trying to, okay. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Celia,
Okay.
Celia, sorry, real quick, could you just remind me what isn't included here in reference to 2009?
So that blue column, let's look at the combined estimated cost. That blue column of the estimated risk less than 3.2 shows about $15 million if we were to replace all those pipes based on those ratings from Johnson County.
And those are the ratings from 2009 that were not revisited.
Correct.
And I understand that was done in part because we didn't have, the county funding to do that piece. Do we have any concerns about that piece as we look towards budgeting? Should we be making some allowance for the pipe that wasn't re-inspected?
So it's not a huge liability or a high risk, but it's always a risk to not go ahead and inspect. So I think we should, and we'll go over our recommended maintenance plan, that we should start planning, to inspect those pipes and maybe break it down into 2.5s and above and just do a little bit over time. And, depending on our budget, based on BHC's observance in the field. So they inspected the pipe that was originally inspected in 2009 with anything greater than 3.2. And they said there wasn't a great degree of degradation, but
Okay.
the important thing is that it really depends on the backfill and whether a utility is bored into the pipe or there's been a point repair over time. So those are the kind of things that could, once we inspect, if we find some of those conditions, then it could be a lot worse. Like if water is, if something has gotten into the pipe to really cause it to start degrading, then I guess that's the problem with not having it inspected it. So I think overall we're good, but I think we are going to find some of those situations. Soil conditions can also be degradation as well. So it'd be a good idea for us to plan some kind of inspection program over time. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and you have this in your packet as well, but we worked with BHC Roads to kind of come up with a maintenance plan. And, we're working through streets right now and looking at stormwater there. So I think budget is the next step. I mean, the good news is that it's just like streets. We've identified the issue. Now the next step is let's come up with a plan. And the 47 million is kind of overwhelming. We currently have 350,000 in our budget, but that could change over time as debt, goes off the books and as we get more utility revenues if the bigger businesses come in. And so I think that's something that staff needs to work together to kind of determine budgeting. And of course, we're prioritizing all the needs in the city to see what we can do for stormwater. But this is kind of a plan that we've laid out. Well, just before I go through this, BHC said, well, if you wanted to replace your system, the whole system over 50 years, you should allocate $1 million a year. And, can we afford that? Is that right for mission? I think that's a guideline, and that's just something that, what we just need to do is, if we don't have $1 million a year, and of course we have to look at stormwater channels, let's come up with a plan to kind of chip away at it and, continue to evaluate and change as we need. So this is kind of what this is starting to do, our maintenance plan. So first of all, with what we already do this, but with our CARS projects, where we get funding at 50% from Johnson County, where we would recommend replacing our 5s and 4s under our city arterial rights. routes. And currently, there are no, it says down below, there were no pipe segments with an estimated risk greater than 3.2 on our arterials. So our arterials are in pretty good shape because we do have that CARS funding. So continue to do that. The second would be, which we're already talking about with our street program, is let's replace at the minimum our 5s and 4s when we do a street project. So we're working through that street program recommendation, and we're recommending 5s and 4s now. It would be great if we could go ahead and replace the 3.2s and greater, because, you know, we do have that county funding. And I think maybe we can over time, but I think we just need to take a look at, you know, now that we have this big picture of all of our assets and the costs, we just need to keep an eye on whether we can do that or not. I mean, 5s and 4s are the most, you know, nearest to failure. So we have a little wiggle room if we can't do the 3.2s and higher, but it would be, you know, ideal to do that with the streets if we could. The next one, excuse me. The next item on the high list would be replacing some discovered system failures. And that's in your report that we found some areas, I think it said about 1,900 feet of pipe where the pipe was collapsed and they need repairs. And so I think we need to take a look at those and see, you know, do we have funds to start addressing those right away? So that was something that was identified in the report, and that's important. So the stormwater isn't flowing because of a backup or we found some utilities bored into the pipe and things like that. Then the next medium high to be medium is kind of what we talked about, is let's develop some kind of inspection program and cleaning of storm sewer. We clean storm sewer now, but let's get on a program and let's determine what we can afford to inspect, and maybe we break it up over a 7-year period. It just depends on the funding that we can allocate. Like I said, that's a next step of just determining what we can do. So we're really proactive, and cleaning out that storm system also prevents backups too. So that's important to do. And then the next would be, we have a lot of pipe running through backyards and outside of right of way that does not have a drainage easement. They were installed back in the day and there's no easement. So most of those, you know, are public pipe. There is some private pipe, but most are public because they carry like public water from the street through a house and a neighborhood to a creek. And so over time, let's take a look at, you know, do we have easements? What's our plan to get the easement? And maybe we do that when we install the pipe. Those aren't quite as critical as what's under a street, but that's something that we need to be aware of. And so let's develop a plan to take a look at and analyze what we need to do there. And then we have medium low, replace the 3s and 3s, you know, greater than 3.2. Like I said, I mean, I'd like to have a higher priority, but I think that depends on the budget we have. And so we've identified that. And just replacing those pipes that are not in the right of way that I talked about that are running through residential properties. So that's what we're identifying as high priorities. And like I said, we have many needs that we need to balance. And we're going to be talking about stormwater channels upcoming. And so I think now that we have this data similar to streets, we've identified, you know, what our needs are, and the next step is developing a plan and a budget, and, you know, and moving forward. So really excited. I think it's going to help us be proactive as opposed to reactive. I know that you all remember Lamar, you know, where we started the project and we found a pipe that was collapsed. And so we actually were able to fix it with the project, but now we have a plan and we're going to be able to be more proactive and address those, you know, instead of waiting till construction and finding it. Now we know. And so I'm really excited about our next steps, even though it's a high number, you know, I think it's manageable for the city of Mission. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Great. Questions for Celia?
I have
That's
one.
correct.
Do we
Yeah,
currently have the option to have the cameras within the pipe? Do we not have a camera operation where you can see the deterioration of a pipe through some database requirement? Do we not have something like that?
We don't have it. We hire a contractor to do that. We usually use A1 to do that. Some cities have their own crews with their camera, but I don't know if it would be most cost effective for us to do that, to hire our own. It's pretty technical and the equipment is expensive. And so currently we would sub that out. Not saying that we couldn't do it ourselves, but currently that's what we do.
If you're doing pipe replacements, that would be an opportune time to do it. It seems like we discussed it several years ago and maybe it didn't go anywhere. I remember that there was an option to have pictures taken so you knew what your deterioration value was on the pipes.
Oh.
They are doing it, yeah.
They did do that with this report. I thought you
Yes.
meant in-house, but yeah, as part of this, that's what they did. So they have pictures of all the pipe and that's how they developed the condition rating. So I can go in and look at all the videos when I'm ready to repair. I get in there and I take a look at the picture and I'm like, oh, this joint is collapsed. This is, there's a root here or whatever.
I thought we had something like that. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood what you were
Okay,
saying.
no, I didn't explain it well. Thanks.
Ken, did you have a question?
Just, I have a statement. First of all, I think that BH Rose did a great job. And I think that this plan is very good, the way you've outlined it for us. The only question I had was more clarification on these maps, because the maps indicate some of the areas that are non-residential structures versus residential structures. And some of the things that are non-residential structures are actually in residential communities. So I was trying to find out what the differentiation was between those two items.
Non-residential would probably be on a street that has some houses but has some commercials, or on an arterial. And I guess I didn't look at it specifically to see. And to me, it doesn't really matter if they're non-residential or they're residential. I think what they were trying to do is look at pipes that were more carried more traffic or higher risk to kind of really focus. But in reality, I don't know that we're going to go in and say, okay, this is a non-residential, so we're going to do this. I mean, we're going to get in there with a street project and repair the pipe. I don't know
The question, if you go to zone 4, observed conditions 1 through 5, which is a map, it's like, I don't know what page it is.
Yeah, I see it.
It has the area in countryside. It has a differentiation, for instance, of residential is circular and the non-residential is square, but they're actually in a residential community. So I didn't know if that was meant that it belongs to the residents or it doesn't belong to the residents. Like
no, it doesn't mean that. I'm looking at, and I wasn't here when the first scope was developed, so I may ask Brent if he recalls, but like on Woodson Road, I see, a non-residential. And so I think that they're classifying that because it's more of a collector road as non-residential because it carries more traffic. But honestly, that's a good point. And like I said, I didn't really focus on that. Brent, do you have something to add on why it was broken up and how it was broken up?
So I think you're right there. I don't have the map sitting right in front of me, but I would also assume that maybe when they said non-residential, it was carrying more water. So maybe stuff that tied into that creek channel itself that ran through countryside is kind of why they might have taken it out of the residential sector, because it's tying into the main system.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I just thought that you had a definition. So,
well, I'm sure they did, and that is a good point. And I'm going to get that answer. And I should have asked them more in detail. But to me, I said honestly, when I looked at it, I'm like, well, why does it matter? Why does it matter if it's residential or non-residential? We're still going to replace it. But I think, like I said, they were trying to focus on what they think may be a little higher priority. But to me, we're going to focus on the streets and the issues and go through and address whatever pipe there is. But I don't think it's private pipe. It's all public pipe.
That's what I wanted to know.
Get
Thank
the
you.
definition. I apologize about that. And I will send out an email to let everybody know.
Celia, I had a question on the budgeting piece. And so I was just wondering, because you said that would be the next part of the discussion. Are we envisioning having a work session to discuss scenarios on that like we did for the streets? Because I think BHC Roads or the staff report said, best case scenario, we'd probably only get about 10 to maybe 20% of this covered by CARS or SMAC dollars, and we'd be looking at funding the rest of it. At least I think that's the number I remember in the packet. And so are we going to have a separate work session to discuss, how would we come up with that additional $650,000 a year if we wanted to, or what are our options?
Well, I think we definitely need to do that. And I'll probably let Laura, if she, Laura looks like she has information to add, but that's definitely something that we need to do now that we know, because we have to develop how we're going to do our CIP. And so we have to get an idea of stormwater budget and what we can do. So I believe that would be the next step. But Laura, feel free to expand on that or correct me.
No, absolutely. I think, I kind of look at the stormwater very similarly to, this in my mind is sort of comparable if we're looking at streets to our residential program. And then the channel piece that we'll talk about it just a little bit is kind of the bigger pieces and more expensive pieces of stormwater, like our arterial streets. So once we have all of that data, we kind of know what those numbers are, then we start to think about, what's our appetite? How quickly do you want to move through that? How do we afford that? So yes, absolutely. We'll start to build kind of some financial scenarios around that.
Great. Any other questions?
I have a question, Solly.
Yep, Hillary.
Thank you. Hey, Celia, I just had a question about stormwater ditches that are probably really old. There's some on Dearborn, and I'm wondering if those are, city property and if those play into this plan at all.
So if they are in the right of way, are you talking about like next right to the road, not channels? If they're in the right of way, they would be city, but yeah, if they're in the right of way, they would be city. But, typically, I don't know that we've really gone out and redone that, but I think that hasn't really been included in this. But yes, that would be a city responsibility.
I'd love to see that explored. It's not high priority, but many of them do have the old corrugated metal pipes in the open trenches underneath, old driveways, etc. And some of them are probably failing as well.
Okay, so in other cities, we wouldn't, because those pipes are just for those driveways, it would be the responsibility of the homeowner for those. That's how we've handled it in older cities. Now, hopefully, eventually, as you and I have talked about, we want to get your streets and your neighborhood and any other areas built with curb and gutter and storm sewer. Let me take a look at that and just kind of review what we've done in the past. But typically, like I said, those little pipes under the driveways would be the responsibility of the homeowner. But let me expand on that a little bit and explore and get back with you on more of that.
I know there's lots to unpack on Dearborn, so no rush. You and I can talk more.
Right. Okay.
All right. Yeah, Ken.
So do we want to go ahead and accept this and move it forward to the council pending clarification on these questions?
Yeah, do we have a recommendation for consent or non-consent on this one?
I'd say non-consent. I don't know. Consent.
Anyone else have a thought?
Consent sounds good to me.
I think consent is fine.
Okay, great. Thank you, Celia.
Thank you.
Our last action item of the night is the hot water tank replacement at the Powell Community Center with Penn, Almoney. And just to clarify, because I think there was a typo in the packet, this is for a tankless system and an amount not to exceed $43,000. Correct, Penn? That's what we're looking at. All right, and we've got you on mute, I think, but take it away.
That is correct. Good evening, Mayor and Council. November, the Powell Community Center had a 400-gallon hot water holding tank begin leaking. So we called in the contractor who does our servicing for the boiler and chiller, Design Mechanical. They were called on site to see if we could find a solution and potential alternatives to limp us to the end line. And fortuitously, the locker rooms were shut down. And since most of the hot water is used in conjunction with the showers for the locker rooms, not too much impact was extended to patrons and staff. Now, we don't have hot water currently to wash your hands in, but it would have been disaster if we didn't have hot water for the showers. So we essentially had 2 months time to discuss some alternatives, talk through some better options, and have the engineer from CTS Group weigh in on what their thoughts were for the potential solutions to our heating systems. In that time, we procured 3 bids. One was from Design Mechanical, $14,700. Heartland Plumbing submitted a bid for $13,200, and then MMC Contractors submitted a bid for $20,500, essentially to maintain the status quo, which would be remove the old 400-gallon holding tank, put in a new one, dispose of that, clean and prepare the site, and then tie into the current plumbing systems. Now, through that process, we were able to discuss alternatives with Matt Anderson, who's the senior project engineer at CTS Group. And you may recall they're the ones leading our facility conservation improvement program audit. And so through that process, he recommended installation of a tankless system. And he indicated that the real savings are going to come from removing the steam boiler that we have and moving towards a condensing boiler. And then when those boilers are eventually removed, any kind of holding tank that we have in place now would need to be removed anyway. So if we move to a tankless system now, we're essentially not wasting dollars on something that could be in place for the next 3 to 6 months. So some background on the tankless system. They are more labor intensive in the setup process because they require an additional gas and water line, an additional flue. There's a lot more efficiency associated with it. There's lower energy cost because instead of the constant runtime required to maintain that 400 gallons of hot water at a certain temperature, it's essentially just on demand. So there's essentially a 50 to 75% decrease in daily runtime. And then the tankless water systems have a lifespan of about 20 years, sometimes longer, whereas the hot water holding tank has a lifespan of 15 years. And so this hot water holding tank was original to the facility, and we've been living on borrowed time essentially for 6 years. So of the 3 responsive bidders, MMC Contractors had the experience to bid on a tankless water heating system, and the other 2 opted out. So in order to ensure the facility is able to provide hot water when the locker rooms and changing areas reopen, staff is recommending approval of a contract with MMC Contractors for a tankless water heating system and the accompanying plumbing installation in an amount not to exceed $43,000. And this project's considered a maintenance item, so it will be paid from the Powell Community Center maintenance and operations budget, which is identified in the Parks and Recreation capital improvement plan. Any questions?
Questions for Penn?
Just a comment.
Yeah, Ken?
I think that this puts good use to our sustainability efforts to try to improve our efficiency, and this is a good solution. I appreciate and applaud your suggestion and the CTS suggestion as well.
I agree. It ties right in line with some of the other conversations we've already been having there, and sounds like a good way to move forward.
Yeah, generally moves us in the right direction.
Yep, and good thinking to flag that and ask them on that pin about forward compatibility. That's good job.
Thank you. Thanks.
Recommend acceptance and move it to consent.
Everyone good with that? All right, thanks, Penn.
You're welcome.
So now we'll move to our discussion items. So we do have 3 of those tonight. So our first discussion item is the stormwater channels inventory, also from Celia.
Bad joke, make it rain. As part of the city's efforts to develop an asset management program and determine our overall stormwater needs, staff and GBA recently completed a stormwater channel inventory. We currently have 11 identified stormwater channels that are owned and maintained by the City of Mission. And these channels, all types of different materials. We have some natural channels in countryside, and we have a lot of different type of concrete channels, some with landscape block and some with gabion walls. So in order to evaluate the channels, GBA created a scoring tool similar to what we just talked about with the stormwater condition inventory based on Johnson County's SMACS methodology, with 1 being new or excellent and 5 being near failure. And they did have to modify it a little bit just to address channels, and included things like water quality, flooding, scour potential, etc. And we did meet with Johnson County, and we were hoping that they would consider, funding, partial funding for these types of channels. They're not there yet. They're still developing their program, and, they just did their system maintenance funds for pipe, but we're hoping that over time they will be willing to chip in with these channels. And so that's something that we're going to continue to work on. Typically, when there's a channel project, they like to restore it to a more of a native condition. So get rid of the concrete and put in more, riprap and natural conditions with native plantings. So that's not always possible everywhere. So hopefully we'll continue that discussion and probably, work on our watershed committee meetings and with the other cities in Johnson County to see if that can be something that they'd fund over time. So the report in your packet shows the 11 channels and breaks them into 31 segments based on the material type. And I can go into a lot of detail. I know you have it in your packet, so I'll present it generally, and then if we need to go into more detail, we can. But the summary table in the report includes all 31 segments, with the risk score, the channel type, and the monitoring frequency. And I'm going to go ahead, and even though you have the more detailed table in your packet, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the table, the quick summary table that I included in the council summary packet that just shows the 9 sites that GBA took a look at and had recommendations for CIP and improvements within the next 10 years. And so this table shows each of these sites, and I'll go ahead and pull up the map too. But what they've identified, of the 31 sites, 9 sites were recommended for repairs within the next year, in the next 10 years, I'm sorry. And 7 of those 9 sites are along Rock Creek, south of Johnson Drive in the downtown area. So this is about a cost of approximately 4.1 million in 2020 dollars, which includes design, construction, and inspection. And the report shows a picture of each of the area and the recommendations. So I'll go to the map in just a bit, but the top priority is relatively inexpensive, and it's a gabion wall project, and it's just east of Reed's Road. So just east of the channel failure that we had the emergency project on this summer. And really the stones are coming out of the gabion baskets, and there's some sloping and bowing. And so I think with a relatively inexpensive cost, we can go ahead and address our most urgent project. The second project is one that we've kind of had our eye on, and that's right next to the channel failure project west of Reed's Road. And they're recommending that as a high priority in the next 1 to 3 years. And I think that wall is being undermining, and there's some voids, and it's the consequence of failure is higher because there's utilities in the area. And so that one is $430,000. And then further down on the Rock Creek channel is a cantilever where I think there was a top on the box at one time, and that was removed, and it's starting to have voids. So they're identifying that project. I'll go to the map in just a minute so you can kind of see these locations. The fourth one is one that is up off of Maple, and there's an area in the concrete channel that's really starting to deteriorate and bow out. And there's a house right next to it that you can see in the pictures, and a porch. And so that homeowner just contacted me right before Christmas and said that he has a report that shows this is necessary to be completed. Now, we need to do some further investigation, because the question is, was the roof and the porch added at a later date, and the runoff from that is causing the disrepair to the channel, or vice versa? So I haven't addressed that yet, but that's some further investigation. But that was number 4 on the list. And the rest of them are within the Rock Creek channel. So I don't know if you have any questions right on this, or I can go to the map that kind of shows these locations.
Yeah, Celia, I had one question that you sort of previewed in your opening comments about SMAC looking at natural restoration, versus concrete. And you said that sometimes isn't feasible. And so it looks like, I know this report was based on replacement of like with like. And so I wondered at what stage, if at all, we'd look at maybe some of those greener options, whether they were feasible or not, when that would come into play.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, so I was going to discuss this in a little bit, but let me go ahead and just talk about it right now, is that if you remember that Johnson County SMAC program has revamped their system, and now instead of us just submitting projects, we've formed into watershed groups. And so there's a number of cities that are representative, and they're doing a master plan right now and identifying projects. And it's not completed yet, but I think some of the Rock Creek projects, because they're in the floodplain, they may be eligible for funding from SMAC. And it depends on, the watershed group has to agree, and there's various levels of funding depending on if it's a high priority project that benefits a number of jurisdictions, et cetera. So it's not known yet, but I'm hoping that's it. And so, once this watershed group and we get to see this plan, hopefully, we will look at, various options. And the natural solutions are really good, but a lot of times what's going to be difficult in Mission is that in order to do that, you have to slope it back. And do we have the room there? And
okay.
So that's the main issue for us. We've, in these older cities, the reason they built, nobody really thought about floodplain, and you got to keep construction away from the creek because it meanders, kind of like a river. It meanders over time. And so, allow a 3-to-1 slope, and, put in riprap and put in native plantings and things like that. And then you don't have to worry about this concrete over time. And so, yes, we will definitely look at that. And I'm hoping that, we're going to be able to get some funding for some of that. And then we're going to have more conversations with Johnson County. So that would definitely be something that when we're ready to do this, let's look at both options just to see something that we can do and what the costs are.
Thanks. That's helpful.
Okay. So let me go to the map. Oops. I'm still trying to, even though we've been doing this for a while, I'm still trying to get better about this. Emily's my share screen technical expert. So, but here's the map that kind of shows the 9 priority projects. So as you can see, most of them are right in that downtown area. So R, T, S, and well, R, S, and U are behind the credit union, going along there behind the pool and City Hall. Site T is an area behind residential homes. It just has a great big concrete void in the bottom of it. And then F, H, and N are kind of around that Reeds area, and those are the highest priority projects. And then that Site E up at the top is the one that is right, the house is right next to the creek. So I'm hoping, like I said, with Johnson County, that we'll be able to figure out some funding for these types of projects, and we'll keep working on it. And the table is identified, monitoring frequency, but, staff is internally planning to walk the creeks every year, and we can adjust as necessary. So like I said, excuse me, asset management, unfortunately, we don't have the funding answers yet, but the first step, identifying the issue, and now we've done that. And so now we get to build on that and develop a plan and move on from there. So I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right. Any questions for Celia?
I have a comment. Thank you, Celia. You are really, really getting down to the weeds on this, and I really appreciate it. I think on a public works level, we are so fortunate to have you and your staff. I think you're doing a great job in identifying where we have weaknesses. When I've called you before and had you out on my neighborhood, you've identified problems we had the street that went many years and didn't get noticed. So I want to thank you very much. You and your staff are doing a phenomenal job, and I thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a comment.
Yeah, Ken.
Celia, I sent to you and to Brent, I believe, an old plat with easements that are attached from Countryside that I dug up in some of the old documents. And I just thought you should have that so that if you need verification of existing easements, you have them.
Yes, and I really appreciate it. I don't know if I meant to respond back if I didn't, but that is really helpful information, and that's going to help us with our projects. And that's the kind of information, because we could have easements in certain areas that we don't know about. And so, that was really appreciated and is going to really help us.
Yes, Brent did answer the question and sent me an email back. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Brent.
All right. Anything else for Celia on this? Seeing none, I guess we'll hear more on this to come. Thanks, Celia.
Thank you.
Our next discussion item is the wayfinding plan on signage from Penn, Almoney.
Thank you. So this is a continuation of a discussion item that initiated back in October. It originally began as a discussion on regional wayfinding, that a plan that Mid-America Regional Council in partnership with some other entities had put in place and adopted, and whether or not we wanted to integrate any of those elements in Mission's wayfinding plan. So after some discussions in October and November. We discussed funding sources, how that could potentially tie in a request for including existing wayfinding for internal signage, and then whether or not we had a budget in place for any of that signage replacement. So we're meeting up again to discuss some of those elements, as well as including some of the internal branding designs that we've gotten from not only Crux, but a couple other vendors for council to review and give feedback on. So I want to share that in a moment. Let's see. Now, before we jump into the feedback element, it's important to know that some of the internal signage that Wayfinds within Mission is owned by KDOT. So any kind of replacement plan we've got in place, KDOT's responsible for some of that. So not all of the wayfinding would be immediately replaced. And the reason we're moving to this element, we're kind of tabling the discussion for the regional wayfinding element temporarily so that we can align not only our vision as a community, but as an administration and leadership on internal signage first and foremost. Let's get a solid idea of what our brand is and what we want it to be on all of this internal wayfinding, and then kind of tie into the region at large. And so after we make several internal signage decisions, then we can extend this project into the regional wayfinding element eventually. So the first element I'd like to discuss is these three park monument signage options. These were designed by Crux, shared with the Parks, Recreation, and Tree Commission in both the November and December committee meetings. Now, the original versions were kind of tweaked, and these were the final versions after the November meeting. And then the PRT members voted on which ones they preferred. These designs symbolize Mission's forward progress and community engagement, with the use of the arrow include a natural rock base, which is symbolic of strength and stability, along with the blue and green from our brand style guide. And so while the Parks, Recreation, and Tree Commission did not reach consensus, 5 of the members chose option 2, 2 chose option 1, and 2 chose option 3. And staff prefers option 3. So this might be a great time to pause and kind of solicit feedback from council on their opinions or variations.
Can I add one question on 3? Is the staff preference for 3 because the mission is bigger in terms of it being a city brand as compared to 2, which had the most planning commission preference? Do you know?
Yes, there's the better balance between the park and you're in the city of Mission right now. And also the height, because you may notice some communities kind of go with more pillar signage and others go with the more square block. Some can be overwhelming if they're too big. And staff felt like option 2, because it's 4 feet on top of an additional 1.5 feet foundation, that could kind of obscure some views of the park and be a little bit overwhelming.
Okay, so it would really be 4.5 feet high with the foundation, option 3.
Yeah, it'd be 5.5.
Okay. Or
sorry. Yeah, option 3 would be 4.5.
4.5, okay.
I think Debbie's saying something, but you're
Oh,
muted, Debbie.
Sorry. Penn, is it possible to look at option 3 with Broadmoor highlighted like it is in the other 2?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of feedback I'm looking for. I mean, there's potential, you may notice there that arrow is split 50-50. we could do a 60-40 split so that there's a little bit more blue space and a little bit less white space.
Personally, I like the idea. I do agree that 3 is the best. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more blue, mainly because I'm a little worried about the white and weathering over time. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what the material will be, but I could see that fading. And my only other thought would be potentially adding illumination. I don't know what that does to the cost there, but having something when you drive by at night or in the winter, still being able to see there's a park there would be great if it is cost effective.
Yeah, I would agree on the more blue, that I'd like to see an option on that, like you were talking about with the 60-40 pin.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, just among staff, we had tossed around that same discussion. Is it a little bit too much white? And so I think there's, we could make that happen pretty easily. On the illumination element, there are costs associated with it. You got to tie into the electric. Another consideration is if we do place this park monument signage in a location and then say through a conceptual redesign, we decide to shift an entrance or, push back a sign or push it forward, whatever the case may be. It's a lot easier to do that if there's no electrical tie-in.
Yeah, Penn, that actually ties to a different concern I had. Could you speak to how easy or expensive it would be to move these as we work through our park redesign process? Will that be an issue at all?
It won't be an issue if we plan for that.
Okay.
So we could just make sure that the concrete has got rebar in it and is set up so that we could tie in and maybe have 2 anchor points on the side and easily access it, but moving it is not very difficult at all.
Okay, thanks.
Sally?
Yeah, Ken?
Yeah, I support number 3 as well. I do think that the height is an issue. It's nice to have a lower profile. With regards to lighting, I don't know if there's any solar lighting that could be considered as a possibility in the situation.
I will certainly look into that and see how viable that is and, how much energy it actually takes to run a lit sign over the course of an 8-hour evening.
That's the tough part with solar. Like I've got some lights at my house and they'll stay on for a few hours once it gets dark. But if it's a light that you want on most of the night, I don't know how viable that'll be, or probably needs pretty big solar panels and power storage for that. But
Yeah, I guess it could be if we still want them to be showing in the dark, but like during park hours, or if we'd want it illuminated really all night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no doubt.
Talking about light that shine onto it to brighten it up, or the sign actually being lit up?
I was thinking.
I was referencing like, illumination coming, like not light behind the sign, but light, lights kind of shining up onto it. If that, so, kind of hidden behind the rocks, I guess was kind of what I was envisioning. I don't know if everybody else was.
I like option 3, and I like the kind of the 60-40 or even like a 65-35 idea. I think the more blue, the better, without sacrificing the mission. And I think it looks sleek and modern. And if there's a way to do it with illumination that makes sense, that sounds good too. So
Great. I appreciate it. Any other feedback?
I like 3, especially if we consider more blue.
And if we can highlight the Broadmoor.
I appreciate the fact that Crux has been able to help us in the design and selection of this.
Yeah, there's no doubt they've been asked to do a lot, and their ability to pivot from one need to the next it's been priceless for me. I've definitely appreciated it. Okay.
Yeah, and I appreciate you speaking to the ability to move the signs pin, because that was sort of a big concern when we had our committee packet review meeting that I mentioned to Emily, who's running that. If we're redesigning our parks, are we going to be stuck with these in a weird spot? So that's helpful.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole reason we plan for these things, is to know kind of beforehand if it's a good location, we want to put it there. But then if, in the off chance it isn't, put something in place where we can move it pretty easily. I think that's great. Okay, the second element was the actual internal wayfinding inventory for the city of Mission. And here we've got 9 adopt a street signs, 2 adopt a park signs, 9 welcome to Mission, 4 Tree City USA, 5 Mission city limit, 1 Mission next 2 exits, Mission second right, and those are all KDOT owned. 2 Mission shopping arrow, 2 Mission transit center, and then 19 street ID with logo, with the idea being that those will be at intersections. Anytime you look next to the light, you can see the old Mission logo, or at some other locations where there isn't a logo, making it more prominent that you are in Mission. And so those are the bids from 3 different vendors. You can see Image 360 at the lowest bid, and each of these vendors has their own specialty. But it appears as if Midtown Signs is a little bit more predisposed to digital printing directly on aluminum, whereas Image 360 and Sign Pro have the ability to digital print onto a vinyl overlay in some situations. So that's the primary cost difference there. And then we reached out to Roland Park, since during the last discussion item, there was interest in kind of creating a internal wayfinding that kind of sits below a stop sign, similar to the Roland Park model. Staff reached out to them. They gave us the name of the vendor, who was Midtown Signs, and said they purchased 20, put them at where they felt were key locations, and Midtown Signs came back with a bid of $380 roughly per sign, for a cost of $7,218. So that's just a reference. And then if we scroll down here, you can kind of see what all of those designs look like.
Penn, is it the bottom one that's the internal wayfinding
Correct.
piece?
Yep.
Okay.
That's the one that is most similar to Roland Park, that we envision putting underneath stop signs and in similar situations.
And so staff has mapped out what those 19 key intersections would be, or?
Yes, great question. So we've mapped out 14 locations. We just put a placeholder at 19 because we hadn't completely thought through every location in neighborhoods that we felt.
Okay.
And so since this is primarily neighborhood driven, we felt it was worth including a few more to place in intersections and neighborhoods. But if staff is amenable after our discussion, and we can certainly include a map of those locations as part of an action item.
Sally?
Yeah, Ken?
Penn, on the welcome to Mission signs, did Crux come up with any suggestions in terms of how to incorporate the city mayor's plaque and other plaques without attaching them on it? Up above and below, is there any other way of doing it so that we can have it incorporated in the sign itself?
Absolutely. In fact, they discussed that. Is it important to have the website on there? Is it important to have the mayor's name on there? Which is, it's really a cultural decision and how strongly the council feels. They could pretty easily just include those elements on the sign. And I mean, if you consider this is a pretty big sign, I believe it's 3 feet by 4 feet. And at least a few of them are that large. And so minimizing the welcome to Mission, Kansas, shifting it up, and then including the mayor's name on the bottom and even a tag for the website is very doable if that's the direction council would like to head.
Well, I think that the website is something you can search in Google and find it pretty easily. I do think that the mayor's name maybe is appropriate to have incorporated in the sign.
Yeah, it's a nice little shout out. Mayor, do you have any opinion on whether or not you want your name attached to welcome to mission signs? I put them on the spot.
It doesn't really make a difference to me. I mean, it seems like it would be cleaner to me if you just had welcome to mission. If you can Google the website, you can Google the mayor if you want to know. So to me, it just seems cleaner just to have welcome to mission, and that way there's minimum amount of change in those signs.
I do like the navy blue versus the royal blue. I like the navy. I think it looks really clean.
Penn, this is Kristen. Are they going to be held up with like the wood stakes, like the welcome to mission signs currently have, or will they be more of a monument, and would that be included in the price?
So that would be above and beyond the cost of the sign. The current bid is based on us installing them on whatever standard is in place right now. So if you wanted to make them more of a monument foundation, that would increase the cost.
Penn, it might be better to, from a standpoint of safety, a lot of the traffic signs are on breakaway standards, and I'm not sure whether that shouldn't be the way we approach these signs as well.
Yeah.
Penn, Kristen's question prompted, I did have a question on the park signs that's related. Do we have any sense of what those stone monument bases would cost in addition to the sign cost?
So that is all inclusive.
That is all inclusive. Okay.
That's the concrete, that's the overlaid natural stone, that's the design and fabrication of the top portion. That's all inclusive.
Okay, perfect.
Solly?
Yep, Hillary.
Thank you. Penn, I just want to thank you so much for this. I know I've been such a pain about signage over the past 4 months, so I'm just really grateful for your work on this and kind of coming up with a comprehensive look. And I know that this is beyond, just the monument signs that maybe some on council originally visioned, but I think we really invested in this new brand, and it makes sense to me to have a collective presentation to the city that isn't piecemealed. So I'm really excited about this. I also would love to be able to, have council take a look at those key intersections just to make sure we feel like there's nothing we're missing in the city. And thank you for your work on this.
You bet, my pleasure. It's exciting to see all the design elements coming to life, and it'll be great to get them in a place where they're noticeable. Any additional feedback on the Adopt a Street or any shopping districts or internal? Okay. Well, thanks, council. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Penn. Our final discussion item for the evening is the communication and marketing contract renewal with Emily and Penn again.
Hello, all. Thank you for hearing. I think I might just start to share right away. I wanted to provide, we are all nearly to, not quite to the time where we'll be asking just for your opinion on our Crux contract for communication and marketing, and whether you see a path forward to continue the relationship with them. I'd like to just review, as you all know, it was a 12-month contract. It was approved in February of 2020. And there have been a few checkpoints or touch points along the way, but I wanted to just kind of recap that for you and then let you know what staff is thinking for a next step and get your feedback on that. So let me share my screen. The pressure's on, expert and all. And can you see all that? or maybe not quite for full screen. Okay. So we did want to just take you through kind of some of the more visible pieces and different elements that we've been spending time on. And this, of course, is all after engagement and the getting to know you period, the touching in through the research projects and interviews for Crooks to get to know our community, and then the decision around summertime for the selection of the brand concepts. And so a lot of the rollout has been in the latter part of 2020 and is mostly in place, but there certainly still will be places that need to be refreshed still, and then new deliverables that we know we have targeted that will be wrapping up with the remainder of the contract, and then as we can going forward. So here, of course, is the brand story. We've used the sub-brands for the departments to good effect, I think, and they're starting to feel real, and like that identity carries through our Parks and Recreation, Police, and Public Works departments. You see that I included in the packet the pages of the newly designed website. We are nearly complete on design for that, and approaching complete on the content. Of course, it's a living, breathing, very many pages organic thing, but we're closing in on a new website that we can share with you maybe in more detail at some point, but it's a fresher look for sure. It's a more modern design developed through WordPress. Lots of flexibility and good service, we believe, for the things we need to do, and also very conscientiously designed with analytics in mind, search terms considered, some of our top priorities really highlighted in a much more thoughtful way than we've done in the past. Our social media channels, Crux was a big help in this. We had several stray accounts that had been started and abandoned in previous iterations of projects. And so they've kind of brought them all together, disabled some that were kind of hanging out, and are trying, helping us have a solid and consistent look across the different cities' channels, and also helping us nurture those pages and help them grow in terms of followers and enliven the content. Keep track of them all for us in a consistent way. So that sort of inventory and refresh and now maintenance has been helpful. Business cards, of course, this is just representative of the different types of supplies and tools we use each day. Those things have been implemented in terms of business stationery, name badges, business cards, etc. So those things are in place and being used now. Email templates, you've noticed, we use Constant Contact for the most part in terms of email marketing. We've never used it to its full capacity. Certainly it's a very powerful tool, and that's kind of the next step that we envision, is taking these emails to a new level with very much more rigorous content list management, and kind of that email journey is what Crix calls it, where you follow the clicks and pursue people who have interest in different targeted areas and send them follow-up communications. And this, I think, is particularly interesting to us in terms of our Parks and Recreation programming, registrations for classes, and membership pursuit as well. We have Powell Community Center signage. Is a big project that had been on the list, with the ADA Braille component as well, which was a piece that we knew we needed to tackle. So consistent signage, bright, cheerful, refreshed, and also helpful for all of our patrons to pull people through the building with really good welcoming signage. Our banners, really fun reveal in the fall to use those posts to their full effect. They've been installed over several iterations, and it was a great hunt for me to determine the number of poles we have and the dimensions and all of that work that we hadn't ever taken the time to do fully. And I really liked pulling all the poles and throughout all of our commercial districts together to have that cohesive signage, and look forward to future banner designs and really livening up that element of our very public facing community. Public Works campaign, that was just one of the areas that we knew we wanted extra emphasis. And so we had fun with this social campaign that really highlighted the work that is done with Public Works staff, and why, of course, you would want to apply and become part of our team. And so those campaigns were a fun one, and I think we'll pursue them in a slightly modified way in the future. But that was just one example of kind of some of the social media work that we've been brainstorming on and testing out and collaborating on. Again, back to the community center, a really fresh look with the monitors. These signs can be updated on the turn of a dime by internal staff, have a really consistent look throughout the facility. Again, this is in contrast to paper signage with Scotch tape up on the walls in many cases. So that is a huge relief, I know, to Penn and others. So we have a very classy, very consistent look, and flexible to message the current messaging that we need for the day or for the week or whatever needs to be done. So that's a big help. Another example of a fun social campaign. So these designs is really professional looking, promotional, very keyed into, you know, the welcoming but business concept that what's this great deal? I need to read more about it and follow up and pursue. So these campaigns have been rolling out with good effect. Parks Activity Guide, just another example of a document that has served us well over time, getting a new look, additional white space, more consistent branding, just that consistent touch that we feel like is a really good step into the current day and what people expect to see from a great facility that they should join. So that's another example of that. I'm really excited about this. I think the holiday family adoption flyer is, you know, a really great piece. I'm noticing now it's 2 pictures of the same side of the flyer, so apologies for that. But this is what I envision for promoting our other programs. So even our community development programs or things that we have had either, you know, an 8.5 by 11 list of text and guidelines, but nothing that was flashy. I'd like to see this as a one pager that you all can take and share with your residents and that we're proud to have in the kiosks in the front lobby. And I think this model will serve us really well and is kind of my next heavy hitter item on the list to tackle. But it's something that just, you know, it's a program we've been long proud of, and we now have the ability to sell it in a way that looks professional and tells the story that we want to tell about the program and spreads the word that it is a legitimate concern that people should get involved with. And I think there's a lot more work to do in this area. And then the Powell Community Center brochure, I hope that each of you have seen this by now. Just a very tight, concise document that shares the flavor of what you can find when you step through the doors and what you'd want to take advantage of, and just some basic information that I know has been on the list for a long time in a really, what I consider to be an excellent piece that really just looks like we have our act together and looks like you should join us. So I'm quite proud of that piece as well. So those are just a few of the items that we've kind of taken forward. Of course, there's little bits here and there that you've seen that I didn't include today. We wanted to tie back to the original scope of the contract that we set out to do in 2020. And this is kind of our best guess. Of course, the contract, of course, was written and proposed by Crux, not knowing what they know about us now, and us not even knowing quite what our needs would truly be throughout a 12-month period. But I think we got pretty close. So clearly, of course, the basics, the brand refresh, all of those just fundamentals that you must have in order to proudly tell your story, those have been in place or have developed and in place. There are certain things on this list, I think, that serve more as an ongoing role that would be part of any kind of marketing and communication effort. So we marked those as complete, such as they are for the time that we've had together, and ongoing, but never totally complete. I wouldn't put the word finished by any of those. And then the in progress, I think for the most part, these are estimates, but some of them we're close on and intend to do within the life of the contract. For the most part, I believe we will be quite close on all of those. And then just that last item, not started. I kind of debate that term as well. The special sales tax logo and brand, we know that's going to be a significant communication effort. And I believe that just the work we've done with Crux and the relationship building and their familiarity with the community and all of that is technically going to pay forward if we engage them further into those campaigns, because they're familiar with all of, you know, our budgeting and our efforts and our relationships with our constituents and the need that each of our departments have and infrastructure needs that we have. So I think that work is a bit started, but not quite in a more intentional way. So I think I might stop sharing this document. What we targeted, I might pull up Let me do a different share. We've targeted a plan for a proposal for an additional year of engagement with Crux. We had talked when we approved or proposed the first year's contract that the second year would come back at a lower cost, as understanding that we would have done the branding work, we would have done the implementation of that brand, we would have started using the brand and targeting the more aggressive sort of move the needle marketing ideas at that later stage. So we've done the website, we've done that brand. We don't need to buy that again, so to speak. So the reduced price from 90,000 to 60,000 is what we were bringing forward in your agenda item. And this is at a reduced rate per hour as well. So whereas we had done 60 hours at $125 per hour, Crux is working with us to propose a $100 per hour rate. And that's of course averaged over their full team of staff that work with us on each project, and $50 a month. So that's the proposal that we have. And to, let me pull up my shared screen again to suggest, here it is. The kind of the shift, just, I mean, and I know this won't be clean for everyone and it's not exactly apples to apples, but the shift in time spent. So of that work, you know, you'll see like the brand identity is 1% of the time. And of course, these are estimates. And if we knew we had a contract moving forward, we want to dive in more tightly with you all and Crux and all of staff together to really target what our actual specific breakouts would be and kind of map that across time. And I imagine we would be coming back to you on a much more regular basis to say what's working, what would you like to see more of, because now we're going to really be in go mode, and you should be able to see results in what we're producing for you each month. But so you see an emphasis on email marketing, for example, but that brand identity is just barely there. Those are for things we didn't catch the first time around, but mostly we're in place. The marketing collateral would be much more targeted to those kinds of campaigns that we know are a priority for us, with a real strategy and something that you'll hold in your hand and that we should see a result from following that. Oh, sorry. And then social media, again, of course, you'll see that staff tutorial and training component still a key piece. And I can give credit to Crux for helping us along the way with that in mind as well. They have the aim of standing up an internal communications team for us that works collaboratively with their outside expertise for things like graphics design and such, but knowing that we're the content experts and helping us kind of communicate what we want to communicate with them has been a good goal. And I hope that they have the chance to do more of that with us. And then the strategy piece, definitely around what harder stories do we want to tell, something like the sales tax renewals, some of those bigger infrastructure stories, the parks maintenance stories. Let's, you know, use their expertise and tell the stories together. Website management and the analytics that you saw up top, more of that same, keeping our website fresh, up to date, and responsive to search traffic and engagement from different people, different users. So that sort of maintenance. So I think this breakout reflects the shift kind of from the design and initial implementation to further utilization of what we've accomplished in 2020. And I think it represents our intentions, or what I think I've heard from you all, in order to be able to really conclusively show the value for the time we have together. The thought I have for the future year is that we would do an update with you all a few months in, which would correlate nicely with the budget discussions, that we could really fully come together, even just through our agenda review, hearing different things from different ones of you about priority or where you think this type of work should really be housed. I feel confident that the first year of the contract did a lot of what I was hoping to accomplish with a wholesale, like we needed that muscle to truly refresh, so that it wasn't just bit by bit or around the margins. So I think that work is complete, and I'm tantalized by the thought of that work not stopping, and that we can see where it goes. But then I think we'll have additional information to bring for you, just different experience with what it's like to work with their support outside of that design period and implementation. So tell us what it's like, you know, or let us experience what it's like working with that outside party, assisting staff and building that type of feedback relationship. in a way that we are reporting out to you and you're telling us, you know, yes, I like this, I want more of this. I think we're still really lacking in this area. And then I think we'd be able to put a really informed proposal to you for the future years and the right approach and whatever, whether that's a small maintenance amount or it is housed differently among staff or any of the rest of that kind of thought.
Emily, could you remind us when year 1 is up? So when would year 2 start and when does year 1?
Yeah, it was the February council meeting that the contract was approved.
Okay.
So we're technically hoping that we're going to use the full extent of the remaining weeks of this contract to finalize some of the things, but that's our target.
Emily,
Mm-hmm.
on the website, the new website, the search engine on the old website seemed to be outdated. It pulled up a lot of nonsense, and I was wondering how they're addressing that in the new website.
Yes, I have a lot of faith in that because we've seen it on the back end already with just their analytics of the existing site even. So I know those search terms will be evaluated from day one. And if there's an error, you know, you can manipulate that with the terms that are available on the page that you want someone to find. And there's just that thought that we've never put towards our existing site. And also the failure to fully remove outdated things that are no longer valid. So I have confidence in what I've seen so far from Dan, the website manager or developer who sees the shortcomings on our website and has already offered commentary on that. So I believe that we'll be in much better shape.
Yeah, Emily, I really appreciate, seeing all those items on the slide. I think you can see there's a lot of, tangible improvements that have come out of this to bring us up to date. It definitely does look, I think, Penn used the term modern in his discussion. I think you echoed that. It does look like we've, are putting forward a look that shows that, we're professional and in this century. And I really like that and appreciate hearing the benefit you felt from staff. I didn't know if maybe Penn or even Celia wanted to chime in on value, that they've seen in their departments or either to date or, ongoing work ideas.
Yeah, one of the best elements of this partnership is that now we have people questioning whether or not whatever they're creating is right. And so we're actually giving consistent, purposeful thought to whether it's the right message, whether it's got the right content, and what that text is, and if we're hitting the right target market. So that's kind of an invaluable unseen element that just a few months with Crux kind of speaking to our communication team is able to proliferate through different levels of staff. So that's been exciting for me. And instead of being a heavy-handed gatekeeper, it's been open collaboration. Like, I really want to say this message. Is this the best way to go about it? And so in that regard, it's been refreshing. And just we continue to inundate them with a lot of asks, and they were consistently delivered. And in every instance communicated, hey, we can get to this today, or this is going to be next week. And that to me is a sign of a professional partnership and one of respect that I would love to keep thriving for us, because they've been, as you can tell, there's a lot of content they delivered for the community center and operations and some of those membership pushes. So we leaned on them pretty heavily.
And as far as public works, I mean, Crux has obviously been more involved with parks for the communications and things like that. But sometimes I think in public works, we're not that good at selling ourselves. We're busy and we're not the best at social media and thinking of all these things. We'd rather just go do the job than think about how we need to promote. And so Crux has really been great, as well as Emily, to help us try to get that message out there and try to think of what kind of messaging that we need to provide to the public. And I think it's an ongoing thing that we really need to think about and focus on. And they're there to kind of help us out and probably kind of prod us along too. And, when we start the street program, looking forward to working with them on, what's the best way to get, like when we do projects, a letter out to the residents and what's the best way to communicate, and especially, as Emily said, with the sales tax, really looking forward to helping us with that message. So I think it's been great, and hopefully we can work with them in the next year.
Right. Any other comments, questions? Yeah, Trent, I see a hand.
Yeah,
And
it's my hope we can continue to work with them for next year as well. The benefits that we've kind of talked about tonight are tangible and numerous, and I was especially thrilled with the community center mailer that just came to our mailboxes recently. I've had discussions with Penn about that earlier last year, just about cleaning that up and kind of giving a really professional, united scope of what we offer there. And I think that that's starting to work. And I'm especially encouraged that we would already have put in that initial time and investment with Crux this year, getting to know us, kind of the introductory phase. So we could really use this money next year or I guess for the second year of the contract to really continue the good work with the ground running and not have to really have any time for any kind of introductory work like that. So I really like what they've done so far. I think that I'm really pleased so far with these results, and let's continue to move forward.
yeah. Ken, did you have a comment? And then I think maybe Debbie, I thought I saw you try to unmute maybe. No? Okay.
I would say ditto to what Trent just said in terms of supporting this project and continuing. The one question I had is whether there's been any discussion around the business district and the partnership between the business community and the city in terms of possibly having Crux provide some sort of support for the business community, but that the business community chooses to maybe support the cost of that.
Yeah, we've dabbled our toe. So when we did the holiday shopping season marketing with the radio station, Crux did review, just for what it was worth. They didn't design from scratch because that's a service that the radio station provides, but they reviewed the script and the design and of course the new look was used. So that was a bridge, I believe. And the business district was so supportive and grateful for the city supporting that initial effort that I think it was a good kind of tease into what we could do. I don't feel eager about taking on that kind of subcontract to our contract based on the work that we have for ourselves first, but I do think we're in such close contact with them, with the Mission Business District and what they want to achieve, that would be not impossible and something to explore for sure.
Yeah, I think this all sounds great and would just like to, echo what's been said about general support for this undertaking. I really like the outcomes we're seeing on the deliverables, and seems like staff is pleased with how things are going.
Thank you. Well, then we would plan to bring it back, I guess, as an action item in February.
All right. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
So that is the end of our discussion items tonight. We do have department updates. Laura, are there any department updates for CDC committee?
Well, since I am just back in the office today, I will ask if any of the departments have updates that they would like to share that we haven't talked about.
Anything?
I have a question.
I think Dan had a
Yeah, Chief.
I will try to sneak away and get some photographs of some of the work that's been completed down the police department with CARES funds, so you guys can see some of that and at the end of the F&A meeting.
All right. Ken, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question with regards to the snow removal. I know that first of all, I want to, give my kudos to Public Works as usual for doing a great job during the recent snowstorm, New Year's Day and the New Year's weekend. The question I had is, I know that we had that ordinance in place that we would get the sidewalks shoveled, and I noticed that there were some sidewalks along Lamar and Null that didn't get shoveled within the 48 hours. And I didn't know if there had been any attempt to notify residents along those areas that they were really required to do that.
We are going to send out a letter this week to all property owners that have a sidewalk in front of their property. So I drafted the letter before the holidays and kind of set that aside. Probably guys want to think about it a little bit more, and probably I didn't want to spring it on anybody over the holidays. You know, Merry Christmas from the city of Michigan. Yeah, that the holiday kind of caused, or the snowstorm last weekend kind of caused a little flat for it. But we'll send that letter out this week, and that's kind of the official notification to property owners, both residential and businesses, that the ordinance was approved back in November. It's in place now. I think this first year is really going to be kind of educational. It's just us kind of getting out and talking to property owners and informing them of this new ordinance requirements. And then as time goes by, you know, hopefully more sidewalks will be cleared than those that aren't. Kind of monitor the people who consistently do not clear their sidewalks and talk to them directly.
Thank you, Brian. The only other question I have for staff is, we've been receiving some emails from a couple of people, one regarding the Mission Bolt demolition, and the other one was regarding, I guess, I'm not sure if it's the telecommunications properties. And I didn't know if there's any response to those. I haven't seen any response to those emails, but they've been sent to all of the council, and I just was wondering if there is a response underway.
Yes, Mayor and I talked about those today, and so we'll be working on getting response to those.
All right. Well, before we conclude our committee meeting, I did just have one comment. We're obviously all here and not watching the news unfold over the past couple of hours, but didn't want to let our meeting pass without commenting, on this highly unusual day. And I just wanted to state that, I'm thinking of our fellow elected officials and our congressional delegation out in DC who've been facing, insurrection at the Capitol today. And I would just like to send them our well wishes and hope that they remain safe and are able to resume the business of governing going forward. And with that, it is 8:48 p.m. And with no further discussion, that would conclude our meeting of the Community Development Committee meeting. Video will be on our website at missionks.org.
Okay. Ordinarily we would take a break, but I have a very short meeting for finance. I ask that you be patient and stay with me, and let's get this through, and we should be through in 15 minutes or so. It's Councilmember Kring. It is now 8:50, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order. Again, in consideration of the COVID-19 social distancing recommendations, this meeting will be held virtually via Zoom. The public is invited to participate and will be allowed to make comments through the online chat feature. Please note that these comments are visible to the entire group. If you wish to make a public comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record and be conscientious of others trying to speak. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. The first thing we have is public comments, public hearings, public comments, and we don't have any of those this evening, so we'll move into our action items. This should be brief. First action item is the acceptance of the Finance and Administration Committee minutes from Audrey McClanahan.
Thank you. Yes, presented here are the December 2nd, 2020 Finance and Administration Committee minutes for your review and consideration. Thank you.
Does anybody have comments on the minutes?
Recommend acceptance.
Thanks, Kim. Any comments about that? Okay, we'll move forward. The second action item, is a resolution outlining certain records that may be destroyed during the coming year also from Audrey.
Thank you. Yes, ordinance 1143 outlines a schedule for the destruction of certain documents and records for the city. It also outlines that a resolution needs to be passed yearly for specifically identifying what records will be destroyed. It does not authorize the destruction of records that would be preserved permanently, such as meeting minutes, historical value records, those kind of things. And it also does not prohibit the destruction of records that are obviously temporary. So in the packet is the resolution that outlines those that are going to be set for to have this happen in 2021. And that is everything for this item, unless there are any questions.
Any comments or questions on records retention?
I recommend that we go ahead and move this to consent. Just a comment, I also wanted to let you know that I've established a lot of documents that, or found a lot of documents that have been turned over to the Johnson County Museum related to the City of Countryside and the Homes Association, so that those are present and have been organized in a way that it's searchable at the museum on Metcalf.
That's great. Thanks, Ken. As a part of that movement from Countryside into Mission, I'm honored that you're moving forward with keeping those documents, because it's very important to that community. Thanks again. Okay, our last and final action item is a surplus property resolution from Brian Scott. Brian?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. This is kind of a routine item that we have at least once a year, where we have various surplus items that we are declaring surplus to be sold at auction or disposed of. The items on this list are primarily vehicles, those vehicles that were replaced in the Police Patrol Division with the lease purchase agreement that we approved, oh, that's probably 12 months ago now, for purchase of new vehicles. And we also have a number of office furniture items that were recently replaced with the improvements down in the police department that Interim Chief Ned was talking about. And finally, old computers that need to be disposed of. These were replaced with new laptops that we recently purchased. That is the list, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions for Brian? Can this be put on consent?
Yes, recommend consent.
Okay, we have no discussion items tonight. Department updates, Laura, are there any department updates for this committee? Okay, Dan, I think you had something. Did you have something you want to share?
Yes, just real quick, if I will just show you some of the things that, two quick pictures of some of the work that's been done to our squad room to kind of increase our social distancing with the addition of the partitions that move further back from the workstations in the patrol workroom. And then
Wow.
Yeah, it is a complete refresh.
You need a before picture.
I know you know, I've been here 21 years and it was same furniture and everything for that whole time. So we really got some a benefit of having. Then this is in the supervisor's office, a similar situation where they all have their own workspaces, and there's 3 more on the other side of the room. And they're able to have more space and have that divider between them and get that refresh in that room as well. So special thanks to Public Works they really came through for us and getting a lot of things done and out and painted, and appreciate all their help as well.
Excellent. Anybody have any questions for Dan or comments? Okay, well, we're coming to the conclusion of this meeting. It is now 9:56, and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at www.missionks.org. Thank you. Any other comments to end?
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New
So
Year.
glad we're here in the Midwest. Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.